Let's get more this morning from Ivailo Izvorski. He's the World Bank's lead economist for East Asia, and he joins us from our Beijing bureau this morning. Dr. Izvorski, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we move on to talk about recovery, I want to point to you and talk to you about the meetings on the sideline of the nuclear summit in D.C. overnight between President Hu Jintao of China and also the U.S. President Barack Obama. Now, they did talk about currencies. They did talk about the trade relations. Let me just ask you, when do you expect the RMB to make any sort of move?
Hi, good morning, Susan. Thanks for having me. Of course, as you pointed out, we have a very rapid and very robust recovery in East Asia. And so together with the recovery led by China, we see incipient and rather strong, in some cases, price pressures across the region. In China, in particular, we have inflation picking up. We have concerns about asset pricing bubbles. So therefore, if these concerns persist, obviously the authorities, among their instrumentarium of tools, have the exchange rate. That is just one of these tools they can use. Also, if there are concerns about interest rate sensitive capital flows, in case interest rates in China rise faster than they do in the rest of the world, in the rest of the advanced economies, as seems to be a safe bet. Also, the exchange rate, some exchange rate flexibility here would be very useful.
So it sounds like you're saying that appreciation would be good for the Chinese economy. What about 3 to 5% appreciation in the RMB for this year? Is that enough to alleviate those issues that you mentioned, inflation and asset bubbles?
Again, let's not actually even focus on numerical values or very specifically say in which direction things have to move. I want to emphasize that as we all know, as countries grow fast, as they converge, income levels and price levels converge to more advanced economies, this convergence obviously can happen in two ways. You can either have very high inflation, you can have nominal exchange rate appreciation, you can have a combination of the two. And which way the authorities prefer to go, obviously, is a matter of national policy. Now, of course, other countries have shown that when you have too much inflation, it's not such a good thing. So obviously, there are arguments here that give role to the exchange rate, not only in China, but also in other countries.
Okay, so Dr. Izvorski, you brought up the issue of asset bubbles. Let me talk to you about what's happening in the Chinese real estate sector, because in recent days we've had a lot of investors and high-profile names reacting to a possible bursting of this bubble in China. For instance, we had Fred Hu, who's the chairman of China for Goldman Sachs, coming in and saying maybe there's a questionable event taking place in that space. And of course, Jim Chanos, who has come in to say maybe China's on a treadmill to hell. And also an MIT professor yesterday who said that this bubble might be bursting pretty soon. Any concerns from you and the World Bank?
We do have concerns that asset prices, particularly in the real estate sector, have risen way too fast in some of the larger cities. So therefore, we think, it's very important for monetary policy, which has been tightened gradually over the last several months, together with the guidance about slower credit growth, the guidance by increasing reserve requirements. Ultimately, we'll have to include some hikes in policy interest rates. And again, probably the exchange rate has a role to play here as an instrument by which to try to slow these rapid increases in asset prices, and you try to slow speculative capital inflow. So by all means, I think we are very concerned that some parts of the market could be developing bubbles. And so, but the authorities, which seem to have instruments at their disposal, have done rather well in the past in attacking these bubbles, even if that may not appear to have been very obvious to some other observers.
Okay, so you don't think the bubble's going to burst then in China?
Again, there are all the instruments to make that bubble not burst, to prevent a bubble from rising further. So I think this is what the authorities are focused on. This is what we would be looking forward to. And we see this slowdown in credit growth, again, from the very high increases last year to somewhat more moderate increases now. Yesterday's credit growth numbers that show credit slowing to about 20% or so year on year, show some hopeful signs here. And the authorities seem to be well aware of the risks that if you allow this massive liquidity which exists in the market to be swashing around and blowing bubbles, obviously this carries huge risks for macroeconomic stability.
Okay, well, I want to get to the World Bank forecast because you're looking at real GDP growth in East Asia to rise to 8.7% this year, 2010. What sort of economic growth, real GDP growth, are you expecting for China then?
We're expecting 9.5%, rising from just short of 9% last year. But, I mean, a very different composition of growth, if you will. Last year, we had this government-led fiscal stimulus, which contributed to rising investment, so government-influenced investment by 6 percentage points of GDP. So out of the nearly 9% growth last year, 6 percentage points, 2/3, was this government-led investment stimulus. This year, we see some larger role to be played by exports. Last year, net exports, difference between exports and imports, detracted from growth. This year, we expect they have to have a somewhat more moderate and positive contribution with a decreased role for public investments.
Okay, well, Dr. Izvorski, thank you so much for your time today. Nice talking to you.